Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martail Podcast. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area Brawler, Skyler Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your Colonial Champion, Sean.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Court-Martail Podcast. And today's episode is a special episode because on this episode, somebody's going to get their ass kicked. Somebody's going to get their wig split. Somebody's going to get their ass kicked. Somebody's going to get your wig split. Yeah. Welcome, one and all. My name is Skyler Greenberg, and I am the Bay Area Brawler at your service. And I'm excited to be hosting today's show. We have a lot to cover, a lot of ground to get up back because we've been missing this regular episode for the last month or so, and I cannot do it alone. So I am with a man who, when they ask what he's got left, he says he has a lot left in the tank. I ask a man who, when they talk about his podcast, he says, that's what I do. I'm with a man who, when he's with the ladies, is referred to as sexual chocolate. It is the Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty.
This is somewhat unrelated, but did you know that white chocolate contains no cocoa solids?
I know that, and that means it's not real chocolate.
So I don't want to say that I'm something I'm not. I've been referred to as white chocolate, but I'm pretty sure in a derogatory way. But that was in my earlier days. And I have since matured, baby, into dusty roads, apparently. and I am excited to be here, and I've waited so long to be able to say this because there's another podcast that does this, and now because I am here in this passenger seat this time, I'm able to say this to you because this is your show.
Ah, yes, it is my show. Well, at least for this week.
For this week, and more to come at some point.
And more to come whenever you feel like taking a week off and letting me be in the driver's seat. And I'm happy to take the driver's seat for this show.
I know you'll knock it out of the park.
So we have a lot of things to cover, beginning with the news of the week.
Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the Wrestle News with Skyler Green.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Because we've been missing a couple regular episodes, I believe, since like 3 or 4 weeks ago, there's a lot of things that have happened in the professional wrestling world. And we're going to try our best to cover as many of the most important topics that I can think of. So, Sean, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
Alrighty. So, first things first. Dark Side of the Ring will be debuting on May 6th with the Brian Pillman episode. And I've heard that the performance of Brian Pillman Jr. was exceptional, and it's going to make you cry.
Have you seen the first part of it, Sky?
I've seen a little bit of the teasers, and it's going to be really impressive episode, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of Brian Pillman's life that I've never realized, and I think even more than that, I didn't realize just from watching that whole teaser trailer just how many kids Brian Pillman had. Like, I only knew about Brian Jr. So that totally...
That was also surprising, too, and I have to give props to his wife for being able to take care of his kids because that's not easy being a single parent.
Yeah, well, in certain situations, and it's been tough I think that there's so much more depth to that than I think anyone has really seen up to this point. And that's really the appeal of these Dark Side of the Rings. You know, they show different perspectives to these stories that don't really see circulation otherwise. And they're able to get uncanny access to people in that area where people that in like shoot interviews, we have not really been able to get that kind of ground before, a la Owen Hart's estranged wife.
Right, and tragedy seems to fall the Pillman family. Did you know about his daughter dying?
Yeah.
That was
Not at the
another
time.
tough
I
one.
didn't know that at the time. No.
And that was also another situation. It's kind of like the Von Erichs, where certain
Yeah.
families that are involved in professional wrestling, they just have tragedy come, and it just affects them so badly. I'm glad that Brian Pillman Jr. is doing what he can. If it wasn't for the fact that it's AEW, I would be really excited for his career.
Well, isn't that such an indictment on AEW though? Because they have a lot of really good talent over there, but it's AEW, you know. But it's funny you mentioned the Von Erichs, because I was actually just rewatching that episode and just how tragic that whole story was, and how many different layers in that. And really, I can't say that it's unique to professional wrestling, but there's always some sort of twist with professional wrestling that doesn't happen in other situations and other sorts of occupations where shenanigans go down.
And especially in professional wrestling, it always seems to involve certain families. Like, the Von Erichs were on top of the world, at least in the Texas area and Dallas specifically. And had they wanted to, they could have been national stars, especially if they had been with WWE in the 80s. And then, one by one, they just started dropping.
No, that's wow. We will have to save that conversation for another time, because I know we got a lot of news to cover, but it would be interesting to make a topic, and we'll have to put a pin in this, of would the Von Erichs have been major national stars if all of them had survived, if they had been with WWE in the 80s? I'm not sure they would have, but that's a really interesting topic, and we'll maybe have to go into that on another day.
That will be another topic for another day. But we're going to stay with AEW for a second.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about a championship that is rarely defended on AEW, but is going to be defended on the May 12th episode. It's not even AEW's championship.
Oh,
it is
God.
the IWPG United States Championship belonging to Jon Moxley, and he'll be defending against Yuji Nagata. So,
Well,
Sean, my first reaction to this was, Yuji Nagata is still wrestling?
I knew Yuji Nagata. I'm not a big Japan guy. I'm to be dead honest with you. I mean, I know the names, but I haven't really seen a ton of the, there's some stuff in the early years. Like, I saw some of Andre's stuff in Japan, and like Stan Hansen's stuff in Japan, which is really good. And Scott Norton, surprisingly, has got some good Japan stuff. Brock Lesnar MVP and the like. But as far as real Japan names, I don't really have them as well tapered down, but I know Yuji Nagata, and he's got to be, what, 50?
53.
Yeah, I'm like, well, it's unsurprising that a really old guy who would not be known by regular American audiences and barely known by, it'll be known by the niche professional wrestling audience that likes that kind of thing, obviously. And how long has Moxley had this belt for? Years, right?
500 days.
Yeah.
Or 600 days. It's almost like his WWE United States title reign, where he had the title for like 400 or 500 days, but he barely ever defended it.
He did nothing with it. That's partially
Absolutely
WWE's fault, though, for just not booking him to defend it.
It was Dean Ambrose and The Shield, when The Shield was kind of starting to cool down a little bit, because the gimmick was still good, but they were kind of feuding with weird guys. But here's the thing about Yuji Nagata. He wrestled in WCW on excursion from New Japan from 1997 to 1998. 1 year. And then he went back to New Japan. He's been in Japan since. And I'm just confused by this, because outside of anyone who watched Yuji Nagata in WCW 20 years ago, or watched his Japanese stuff, is going to know who he is. So when you bring him on to an American national broadcast, is it supposed to make anyone excited to tune in and watch this?
Well, we've said from the start, Sky, that that's not their intent. That's never been their intent. Their intent is to continue to satisfy the group of fans that they already have, even though they get these one-off pops with people like Shaq and Mike Tyson. But at the end of the day, that kind of booking is exactly for the type of people that already like 3/4 of the stuff that the executive vice presidents and their tier of talent do.
I mean, that's true. It just feels like Tony Khan is appealing to the small group of wrestling fans that were disillusioned by WWE, and now, like, that group is small. It's maybe 1 million or so, maybe 1,100,000, maybe a little bit less.
It's looking like it's going back to 800,000 now. Looks like they're not going to be keeping most of that NXT audience that they were hoping they'd get from this day that they switched.
I mean, they got more people at the beginning, but the problem with their product is that it sucks, and people who watch it and love it are going to watch it and love it. But for anyone else who doesn't love it, there's nothing to draw them in. This show is schizophrenic. It is 5 or 6 people who are putting together a segment for their part of the show, and then they don't coordinate with each other so that they don't. Every single match has a run-in. Every single promo has a run-in. Every single storyline or everything is just jumbled and mixed up and served in a blender. No one feels special on that roster. No one feels important.
This is like if Vince Russo were the kind of... If Vince Russo had been a badass who smoked cigarettes and snorted coke in the locker room, this would be what the booking is like. And I'm not saying that Tony Khan's doing that, but he is wearing sunglasses, and his eyes do look pretty frantic, and he does look a bit disheveled recently.
And that's the face of your company.
I'm not here to cast aspersions or to accuse. However, it is somewhat suspect, is it not?
It is, and that's the face of your company. Because all of this really has just been to get Tony Khan over to an American audience.
Yep. And I've said that before. A lot of these sightings are not for the AEW. They're to show, look at the new toy I just bought. It's Christian Cage. I mean, can you explain that debut? Walk out, sign a contract, say nothing, leave. That was not for Christian
Cage, or I don't know, everyone. I don't know.
This is definitely the Tony Khan show. We've said it before,
and we have sworn off that show because we can't watch it anymore.
Yeah. So if there's one really good match on it, you tell us, fans. You engage with us, and we'll watch it. But until that time, I want no part of it.
Right. And speaking of a show that no one wants anything to do with, Impact.
Oh God.
And speaking of people who win titles for no reason, Kenny Omega beat Rich Swann for the Impact World title at Rebellion on April 25th.
Yeah, there's no way that anybody didn't see that coming. There was no way that Rich Swann was going to retain that belt.
Obviously. But here's the thing. Apparently, Rebellion did a lot of numbers for Impact because of Kenny Omega and his involvement getting the AEW fans to watch. So, Kenny Omega, ratings draw?
I mean, if you're trying to boost Impact from, like, the scraps outside of the garbage can that the squirrels have already picked through, to becoming the premier trash that actually has more than just the bun of the hot dog, but maybe a little piece of the hot dog at the top of the trash that the squirrels are trying to get to.
Hey, you don't get to talk about McDonald's like that.
Well, God forbid McDonald's starts serving hot dogs. Oh, Christ.
You know they will.
Dear Lord, I shudder to think of the day. That is when the apocalypse will truly begin, is the day that McDonald's releases a hot dog. Is the day the world comes to an end.
But yes, Kenny Omega.
Yes, Kenny Omega.
I'm ignoring that right now because I started it and I'm ignoring it because the joke was bad.
Because this is your show.
Yes. Speaking of schizophrenia, but Kenny Omega now with the AEW World title, the Mega Championship, AAA Mega Championship, and the Impact World title.
Wow, what a badass. Maybe more titles that American audiences haven't heard of will make more American audiences hear of me. Genius tactic.
So how long do you think it will be until Kenny Omega wins the Ring of Honor World Championship?
I'm hoping to God that Ring of Honor has a little bit more honor than that. I know they've had him on before, but I don't know. I don't see it coming from Ring of Honor. I think Ring of Honor has always tried, at the very least, to maintain their own identity. They've tried. With the exception of their talent trade with New Japan, and I'm not saying they've always been successful, but they've always tried to make their own identity. I don't think Ring of Honor would accept. I would hope Ring of Honor would accept.
We'll see, but right now the ROH World Championship belongs to Rush, so you never know.
You never know.
But speaking of that AAA Mexican Championship, or the Mexican World Championship, just there, thank you.
Yes.
In AAA, Andrade Cien Almas, or the artist formerly known as Andrade Cien Almas, has joined AAA and plans on challenging Kenny Omega for that World Championship in a future date and time.
I'm all for that. A, because it'll probably get the belt off Omega, because in what universe has that helped AAA? With Kenny Omega going down there, what? To defend it once? Recently?
I can't explain AAA's actions.
What is with AEW champions having belts of other companies and then doing jack all of nothing with it?
Now, part of that is because of COVID and last year basically being a wash.
Right. Okay. That is fair. That is solid logic.
But at the same point, if that's the case and you know you can't get their belt back, why not just book a match with a local talent who will actually be there? Like, they had the opportunity to take the U.S. title off of Moxley with Kenta, and they didn't. They could have had someone from AAA win the title from Omega and keep the title in Mexico, but they chose not to.
And they didn't. Yeah, I don't understand. Because it's not like AAA is getting any ratings out of this. Really. It's not like Omega's been carrying the AAA Mega Championship around with him. He hasn't. So it's not like they're even getting publicity on the show.
Right. And that's the other thing, too, is that Jon Moxley, the whole time he's been mentioned on AEW, besides the one-off with Kenta and the one-off with Yuji Nagata, has not even been mentioned as being the IWBG United States champion.
I don't understand. I just don't. Way to value your belts, guys. Way to bring some prestige.
I'm just hoping that Andrade takes that title because he's so much more deserving than Kenny Omega.
They're not even cutting promos, for Christ's sakes. God damn.
Professional Wrestling 2021.
Yeah, seriously, y'all. How low we've all fallen. Worldwide. Worldwide.
Well, let's keep going low. And let's go to Sanford, Connecticut in WWE.
Oh.
And Mickie James having all her stuff sent in a trash bag by head of talent relations Mark Carano, who later got fired.
Now, we did touch on this, I believe, last week. When it aired last week. Even though that was recorded at a different time. Because of shenanigans with video editing, of course. And as a result, Mark Carano has been fired. And that's pretty much your lot on that deal. I mean, obviously, I don't know whether that was meant as a joke or not, but kind of a dick move. I mean, I understand wrestling is all about ribs, but that kind of makes you wonder, considering that the people who, like, I don't know whether he didn't say that it was a rib or if he just thought it would be funny, but I don't see how they couldn't get rid of him. Although it kind of seems to me like they were trying to get rid of him anyway.
Yes, because he had lost his position to John Laurinaitis, and this kind of feels scapegoaty. The other thing, too, and this is the part that kind of makes me a little bit suspicious, is the fact that talents such as Jillian and Gail Kim allege that this incident has also happened to them when they were released back in the early teens. And that's when Mark Carano didn't have the position that he has right now. So this seems systemic. This is WWE in general. They just got caught one time because Mickey James happened to have social media, which didn't exist as big as it is now, and it looked really bad. And this is a guy they were trying to scapegoat anyways.
Yeah.
And Sean,
Fall Guy.
you know the part that I heard that makes me really feel suspicious about this whole thing?
Okay.
Is that Mark Carano is one of those guys who eventually, like all the other ones, will get rehired at some point once the pressure comes off.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. Here, go to another territory for 6 weeks, learn a new hold, and then come back. That's pretty much what happens here.
It's stupid that once you get into Vince McMahon's good graces, he will fire you and then rehire you whenever he feels like it. Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff,
JR.
Michael P.S.A., Bruce Pritchard, Mark Carano,
John Laurinaitis.
John Laurinaitis. I mean, the only one he hasn't fired is Kevin Dunn, and that's actually kind of surprising.
Well, that's because his father saved the tape library from a burning building, and Vince Sr. offered him and his son a job for life. Or whatever the story is behind that. Some story like that. And
yes, that's the exact story, is that Kevin Dunn, not even Kevin Dunn himself, but his father saved the tape library, and the McMahons have been in their debt ever since.
Which makes no sense considering who the McMahons are. But you know, sometimes that's just the way that the cards roll. But God.
But anyways, and by the way, we're not even going to talk about Eva Marie returning to Raw.
Well, yeah, that was actually the point I was going to make. I was like, you almost wonder, maybe Mark Carano just didn't want to rehire Eva Marie, and now that John Laurinaitis is back, he's like, it's Eva time. I can't do a good John Laurinaitis.
No. It's Eva time. I'm John Laurinaitis. I'm people power.
It sounds like if John Laurinaitis was fused with the Cowardly Lion.
I want a heart.
Oh, that's great. That's great. He's chilling with...
So apparently we need to do a show one day where you're just Dusty Rhodes and I'm just John Laurinaitis.
This is the Dusty Rhodes and John Laurinaitis, the Cowardly Lion. What a show we have made here for the Court-Martail podcast for all the listeners. If you're just joining us here today, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is your show, though, Sky.
Yeah, yes, it is. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Anyways, but we will end on our star of the week, Mark Henry, who has lost 80 pounds in an attempt to try and have one last retirement match because he didn't feel like he got a really good retirement match. And I don't know if you've seen the Instagram picture, Sean. He's in good shape.
I have not seen the Instagram pictures, but I will have to take a peek here. If you'll excuse me for 1 second, baby.
But I saw this picture. I'm like, is that Mark Henry? And I was surprised. He looks so thin.
I'm actually excited to see this because Mark Henry, I've always liked Mark Henry, and he really, we'll talk about it here in a minute, but he really came into his own as a wrestler, and I honestly would not mind seeing one final match with Mark Henry in it. Just don't make it against Baron Corbin. Please, dear God, do not make it against Baron Corbin.
I think it's going to be an independent wrestling thing. I don't think it's going to be WWE, but I would be excited for it too. Now, let's see if I can send this picture to you.
Damn. Mark Henry looking jacked, yo. I mean, he's always been jacked, but this is like jacked and really just toned. Good for you, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Mark Henry looking thin.
Yeah, that's
great.
Imagine
if he was in this shape in his wrestling career.
Well, that's interesting because I don't know whether that would... I think that may have honestly worked to his detriment. In a weird way, I think that part of what made Mark interesting was that look of how big he was. If he was so in shape, as great looking as he is now, I don't know if it would have worked the way that it ended up working.
That is true. The size and the demeanor of Mark Henry is what made his matches good, but also what made his promos great. Because when that big man is talking, you listen. And I believe that's a great segue to talk about our topic of the week, promos, and why they're not as good as they used to be.
All right.
Now, in our match of the week, Mark Henry cuts a promo at the end of the match. And when he cuts this promo, there is a conviction in his voice. There is a realism in what he says. And when you look at his eyes, you see it in him. When he talks, it's not necessarily the words that he says, or the words he says are really good, but the way he says it was so damn it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I just mwah, that's so perfect.
Yes. No, it was, and I mentioned it on the live stream as well, if you guys haven't watched that. But I mentioned it on the live stream that part of that was that there was a little bit of truth in what Mark Henry was saying. I think that Mark Henry, in a lot of ways, really did believe that. When he was talking about how y'all were haters and doubters, and you didn't believe I could do it, and you didn't believe I could do it, which, in a lot of the Smarky sense, a lot of people didn't. A lot of people didn't think Mark Henry was good enough to be world champion. And really, it was only in this time that he really proved that he was that good, and he was good enough to have earned that. And the next couple years for Mark were terrific, and his promo ability, from where it was when he first showed up in 1996, can you believe it was that long ago? All the way up to now. Incredible difference. Absolutely incredible difference.
It's one of those things that you kind of forget with Mark Henry because he's been around for a long time. He's a veteran of the business at 2011 at that point.
Yeah.
So, but you have to go back. He is so good. Well, we'll go back a little bit later. But the point is that promo was really good. And all of his promos, especially later on, that retirement promo speech is still one of the best ever.
Yep.
Just because of how he hooked people in with emotion and range. And then he finally suckered John Cena into a World's Strongest Slam.
Yeah, that was another really good promo. And part of that was people all expected Mark was going to retire. And Mark worked him. Mark worked him. He was a good worker. You know, the fact that he developed into such a good worker is so admirable. And really the promo abilities, the key to these promos and why these promos work so well, it's not even just the conviction. I mean, you need the conviction due to he means what he says, but you could tell the words are also his own. They're genuine. They're coming from him, as opposed to what we get now, which is, here are your lines, deliver your lines. And people like Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre are good at delivering their lines, but their lines. You know,
that's the problem, is that it doesn't feel like professional wrestling. It feels like an actor reading a script, except they're just doing it live. And that's the problem with promos now. You turn it on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown or AEW, and you listen to what the people are saying. You don't believe for 1 second that those people actually mean what they say,
nope,
or even believe what they say.
Nope. And for the people that they allow to talk and the people they don't allow to talk. Because there are people who don't talk who are who are great at talking, and there are people who they do allow to talk who are awful at the stick, if you will.
When you think about this for a second, MJF, when they allow MJF to talk, is a fantastic heel.
Yeah.
But when they give him corny lines or corny things to do or say, he just sounds so fake.
Dinner Debonair, anybody?
Oh, God.
Yeah. Hey, it won him an award. It did win him an award. I will give credit where credit's due.
It won him an award from a newspaper whose credibility has been so shot it's Dave Meltzer territory.
Oh, well, I'm not here to talk about... I don't know nothing about news sites enough to be able to speak on the subject. But I guarantee you this. A lot of people cut promos on news media nowadays about how phony and contrived that it is, whether it is or not. And part of what makes promos hurt and what does them damage is when you can't believe what they say, when you can't put your trust in that conviction. I look back to the pipe bomb as an example. You could tell that when he said, I have a lot of things I want to get off my chest, he really was getting things off his chest in that promo.
Exactly. And that promo, day by day, ages so beautifully because everything he said was what he said, what he meant. It were CM Punk's words. And they were not written for him. They were not scripted for him. He went out there with a microphone, and they let him talk.
And for one of those worked shoots that they do, and that's what happened. And Steve Austin was there as well, speaking of promos. Because the difference is, with the conviction of he means everything he says, you definitely got that from Steve Austin. But Steve Austin definitely had it was definitely more, I don't give a damn in his attitude and in his gimmick. And that, you believed that he didn't give a damn. And part of what makes these promos so good is that with baby faces, when they cut good promos in the old school or in the new school, you could tell that they stand for something. They mean what they say, and they're upset about something going on. They say who's responsible to do it, and they say what they're going to do about it. And there are a lot of really good, and the heels. Yeah, go ahead.
Allow me. And when the heel talks, no matter what he says, no matter how much truth is in it, you cannot like him. He is so unlikable, so smarmy, so dominant, or so hateful that you just want to see the hero kick his ass or her ass.
But what's interesting about heel promos is that they also speak the truth a lot of the time. It's I don't like the way he's saying it to me, but he's got a point. And that's what makes a truly good heel, I think.
Because no matter how right the heel may be, whatever he is saying is said in such a bad way, you just can't like it. Like, remember when Daniel Bryan was an eco warrior and he was fighting for the environment?
Yeah.
And that's a great cause, but the fact is that you didn't like the way he said it to you, and you felt like he was talking down to you whenever he was talking about eco-friendliness, and you just wanted to see someone kick his ass.
Yeah, and that's honestly the heel work of Daniel Bryan going really deserves credit, because he took that and ran all the way down with it. And he did a great job.
All the way up and all the way down with it.
Yeah, and promos really are, the promos just don't have the sting now, but people like Daniel Bryan still have a little leeway in that. I think. A little bit. Not all of it, because he does a lot of line stuff too, but he has these moments. I think back to The Miz too. He's another one. When he's scripted, he's awful. But when he's allowed to just say what he wants to say, that's the only time I'm like, all right, I'm cool with The Miz. He talks well.
It's almost the same thing with commentary. If you're in the person's ear and you're telling them what to say and what to do, no matter how good they're saying it, it's going to suck.
The fans will always see through manufacturing. That's really the bottom line of this. And the loss of people being able to say what they want. People like Brian Pillman who could act like a loose cannon, and that was the gimmick, and people saw appeal in that. You've taken all of that away and sterilized all of that. So now you can't believe anything that anyone says anymore on any of these shows because they're not real. And that's really the horse that was left and shot behind the barn when it comes to professional wrestling here in 2021.
Unfortunately. But we can't go back to a time when promos felt real.
Yes.
And wrestlers felt like they mean what they said and said what they mean, and they kicked each other's asses in the ring. Such as our match of the week.
Oh, you said the magic words. He said the magic words, and you know what that means, folks. It's a regular episode. This is his show, but I'm still going to announce it. Roll it.
That's it. It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the babyface cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. It is the match of the week. We have got a great one here at Skyler's request, and I'm going to just quickly volley it back, as it were, just like a tennis serve that was handed to me, and now I can serve it back to Sky to talk about the context behind this match at Night of Champions 2011.
So, 2011 is an interesting year for the World Heavyweight Championship. And I like to think of this year as the year that rewarded workers who really deserved to have runs with the world title.
Yep.
The first was Christian, who got 2 world title reigns and an amazing feud with Randy Orton.
True.
The second is Mark Henry, who got a great match out of Randy Orton and had a good run as the world's strongest man.
Hall of
and
Pain.
the curator of the Hall of Pain.
Was that the first time he said Hall of Pain?
So he had been running with the gimmick at the beginning of 2011. I want to say around April or May.
Okay.
But he was in full swing at this point, which I believe was September after SummerSlam, and he was the curator of the Hall of Fame.
Yes, okay, but that had been established.
But this had been established. But this win, this title win specifically cemented him, and that's what made the Hall of Fame gimmick work. Which, by the way, funny enough, the Hall of Fame gimmick was originally created by Brodus Clay.
Well, we all know,
and it was given to Mark Henry after Brodus Clay had it shot down because they didn't feel like he would be able to sell it.
Would they have been wrong? I don't think so.
No.
I haven't seen his recent work in NWA, but I've never been a big Brodus Clay guy. I thought it was brought up too early, he was too green, and then he never got any better.
But I will say, if he did come up with a Hall of Fame gimmick, it's a great idea, and I'm glad that they gave it to Mark Henry. And at the end of the year, Daniel Bryan won the World Heavyweight Championship after Big Show defeated Mark Henry.
Yes.
And Mark Henry DDT'd him on chairs, and Daniel Bryan cashed in Money in the Bank.
And then 18 seconds later, Sheamus.
Well, we're not going to talk about that part.
But that's what happened.
We're here to talk about Night of Champions.
Yes.
And Sean, what did you think of the match of the week?
It was a Randy Orton match. It was slow and it was well paced. You know, it only ran, like 13 minutes before Mark Henry cut this promo, so maybe it just felt a little bit longer because it was just a slow start, which is fine. But honestly, I thought it was fun. I mean, they did a good job. I thought that they did a really good job of capturing Mark Henry's facials throughout. His frustration, his anger, all of it.
Exactly. This was a match where it wasn't really high spots. It wasn't all action. This was storytelling, psychology, and specifically, Mark Henry was the focus of this match. Not that Randy Orton didn't do a good job. He pulled out some great moves in this match. Like, his drop kick in this match was
beautiful.
Perfect.
Absolutely beautiful.
And I joked with you about this off air. When's the last time Randy Orton did a sleeper hold?
God, I don't... Randy Orton, when he wants to work and put new stuff in, he'll do new stuff. Like, he pulled out a whole bunch of fun stuff with Edge. But... and him with Randy Orton. I think that Orton knew that getting Mark Henry over was, and in a good way, was going to help him in the long run as well. Because Orton had been established, but they needed new people. They knew they needed new people to cycle through. Because John was getting vehemently booed a la Summer of Punk. And
right. And CM Punk was hot, but we're not going to talk about the main event because the main event was terrible.
Because... all I'm going to say is Triple H versus Kevin Nash in a sledgehammer on top of a ladder match. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Which was actually decent, but should never have happened in the first place.
Exactly. But this was the year that Randy Orton was trying to get other people over.
Yeah.
He wanted to get Christian over because he really had respect for him, and they had been great friends, and he really wanted to get Christian over.
Yep.
Same thing with Mark Henry. Randy Orton really wanted to get Mark Henry over, and he did his ass off bumping for Mark Henry.
Yeah, he did. And that was the big thing, too. And I think what was really nice is that you could tell that Mark's ring presence was so much improved from where he was even just 2 years earlier when Orton and Mark Henry had collided in that gauntlet match on Raw during the celebrity guest host era. Ugh. But, but it had happened. And actually, I think Mark Henry beat Randy Orton then, too.
Yes, but Randy Orton, well, Mark Henry was the face and Randy Orton was the heel.
Yes.
And at that point, Mark Henry, he was an okay babyface, but he just didn't have the same energy or intensity that he does as a heel.
No, and this really was perfect for him. And you could really tell that there was definitely, Mark definitely meant every word of this promo at the end. Where there were a lot of people who did probably say, for whatever reason, you know, that he probably had in his mind that they told him that he couldn't do it or he wouldn't do it. He had probably read smarky stuff or had smarky things yelled at him throughout his entire career. So this meshed so well because they were able to really rally at a decent comeback and make things look solid. And nothing here looked like it was too contrived either, except Michael Cole. I could not handle Michael Cole.
Michael Cole was awful, and the less that's said about him, the better. Booker T and King were fine, but you can't have those two and Michael Cole and have a good commentary.
But it's glaring.
But the other thing too,
I tried to ignore it. It's like, and this is what baffles me about this, because they've stuck with this same dude. We're talking 10 years ago now, this match. Or 9 and change. And Michael Cole is equally as, if not more insufferable now in the same exact way than he was in 2011. And it's for the same reason. And it's the same reason we just talked about with all the promos.
Exactly. You don't feel like you believe anything Michael Cole says. And there were potential here. The way Mark Henry won this match in the finish, and the way Michael Cole called the finish, was actually really good. And I saw the sparkles of like, okay, this is the Michael Cole I can get behind when he has his emotion and fever behind it.
Yeah. But that just barely ever happens.
Right. But this finish, Randy Orton hits most of his signature moves, never hits the RKO successfully.
Yep. Which is great. And I thought they were going to give him one, honestly, as I was leading towards this, because I'd never seen this match before. I thought they were going to give him one, and then Mark Henry do like a big press kick out, and maybe it won. But this was arguably better that he couldn't hit it. I personally would have had just Mark Henry hit just one World's Strongest Slam and not have Orton kick out of it. That's my only complaint about this match. I would have liked one and done.
The only thing about Mark Henry I'm not a big fan of is that I'm not a fan of the World's Strongest Slam as a finisher. Because when you look at it, it doesn't look very impressive.
No, but he was big enough to where, and I think this is kind of going back into our conversation earlier about his weight, that I think that he was big enough to where that you could feasibly imagine, because of how much weightlifting he does, that would actually hurt, having his whole chest and arms and body coming down onto your body. You could make the argument because he has the size and he's got the look to make it work. If he had been 100 pounds lighter, he would not have been able to do the World's Strongest Slam. But he was able to get the World's Strongest Slam over because of the physique that he had.
I would agree. I do think that he definitely had the strength and the background to support that. And it is something that I do think is really impressive, is the fact that Mark Henry, with this promo, the fans were hating him for the most part, but there were some fans who were cheering the victory. Mark Henry, with this promo, got so much heat because it was just a great promo where he basically turned on the crowd and said, "Y'all didn't believe me. Y'all thought I was a bunch of haters. I am not sharing this with any of you. You can all stick it," basically. This was great.
Yeah, it was a great little punctuation to cap off what was to come. You know, it was a great way to kind of cement, I'm the champion and this is my identity as champion, and now it's going to be people chasing me, and I really do enjoy that and the way that it was delivered. And again, the conviction, because I 100% believe that Mark Henry wanted to say this, had to say this, and believed in every word that he said about it.
And this is a great way to segue into talking about the world's strongest man himself, Mark Henry.
Although he's been the focus of pretty much every conversation we've had up to this point. But let's go a little more in depth.
True, because there's a lot to talk about with Mark Henry.
There is.
And it's a very interesting life, I have to say.
Yeah.
Did you know about his powerlifting career?
Some about it. I remember watching the Stone Cold Sessions with Mark Henry, where they went into it a little bit.
But basically, if you look at his powerlifting career, he just kept winning championships after championship after championship.
Yeah. Oh, no, he was dominant.
90s.
Dominant power lifter. It's what drew his attention to WWE in the first place.
And he is an Olympian. 1996 Summer Games in Atlanta, Georgia. He was competing for the United States.
And I think it was Jerry Briscoe, who found him.
Just think about this for a second, okay? When Mark Henry at age, 10, was 5'5" and could squat 600.
Yeah. That's a big man.
That's a big boy
big
right
man.
there.
Big man.
And apparently, it was his work at the Summer Olympic Games that got Vince McMahon to decide that he wanted to bring him on and signed him to a 10-year deal.
Yeah, which was unheard of at the time, but not the only long-term contract that Vince would have wrestlers sign, a la Bret Hart, in that time, for whatever reason.
Apparently. Which, by the way, it was talked about with a couple of specialists in the weightlifting world. Had Mark Henry had continued to work on weightlifting instead of professional wrestling, most likely he would have been the strongest man in history, because he was getting close to what would have been his potential. But he focused instead on being a professional wrestler. But that's just amazing. The physical specimen that Mark Henry is.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that I'm sure that there's probably a group of people out there who believe that his potential was thus wasted on professional wrestling. And really, if you look at the first few years of his career, you could probably form an argument about it.
That is definitely true. And this is one of the times where WWE not having a developmental system in the 90s, or in the 80s, 90s, and early O's until Ohio Valley Wrestling, this is what hurt them, because Mark Henry, fairly green prospect, only 24 years old, never been in professional wrestling before, and they have him out there with the Nation of Domination.
Well, his first matchup ever was on pay-per-view. Imagine the kind of pressure that puts on somebody.
Yeah, that's bad. By the way, that match, if you go back to it, he was just awful.
It's rough.
Awful.
It's a rough match. But it's his first match. He can't be, you know, what are we supposed to expect?
But that's also an indictment on WWF at the time for bringing this guy, knowing he's never wrestled really before, and deciding to have him wrestle a match.
Well, but this is also 1996 WWF that's getting the crap kicked out of it by WCW. So they're trying gimmicks at this point. They're trying whatever they can with people like Mark Henry and trying to bring in different audiences, which is why people like Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn came into the mix later on, because UFC actually kind of needed WWF's rub at the time.
Well, at least Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn had combat experience, so they could work their punches. But Mark Henry, they put him in the Nation of Domination in January 12th, 1998 to try and help him get over. It was a weird time, I have to say, having him be in the Nation of Domination with The Rock, Kama Mustafa, D'Lo Brown, and Farouk.
He went from ultimate white meat babyface All-American like one day to, well, I guess it was a couple years to I mean, he didn't look out of place. I just think he was still really green. I mean, there was still a lot that Mark wasn't getting about pro wrestling, and being around those guys was definitely a help. Can't say it wasn't, because definitely Ron Simmons was teaching him a lot, and I'm sure that he got a lot of that, but there was always going to be a limit to what Mark Henry was going to be capable of in that time, given the talent involved at the time.
And then they decided to do something even worse and give him the sexual chocolate gimmick.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It aged poorly, I will say, because it's Attitude Era, and a lot of Attitude Era stuff ages poorly. But in the vacuum that was the Attitude Era and the success of the Attitude Era, sexual chocolate did get over, but then they put him into just the absolute worst positions. A la Mae Young giving birth to a hand. Let's never forget. Yeah. Yeah. WWE, everybody. That was at their peak. But
I mean, the storyline with him trying to overcome sex addiction and then the Godfather showing up.
Yeah, what a time it was for Mark Henry. But you know what? It at least showed a side of Mark Henry that hadn't been seen before. He had a little bit more personality out of Mark Henry, which was not something they had. And then he gets taunted for not being the world's strongest man and saying he is, but not being touted it. So he's got to go back and whip some ass. And guess what Mark Henry does?
What does he do?
He whoops some goddamn ass. And he wins another world strongman competition for the world's strongest man. And I love this conversation that he and Vince had right beforehand. And I think about this all the time. Right as Vince, as Mark Henry says, he says to Vince, I've got to go take care of this. I've been challenged. I got to go take care of this. And Vince says, Mark, obviously, pal, if this is your decision, I'm totally happy with you doing this, and obviously you're free to pursue it. Just know that there's no room in WWE for the world's second strongest man. That to me, what kind of pressure that put, but that's exactly the kind of motivator that would make somebody go out and kick some ass like that, like Mark Henry did.
Right, exactly. And the thing about it too is that he goes and he becomes successful.
Yeah, and then they do the whole thing with like him stopping the car with his legs and then doing the whole like bending the frying pan thing in 2002.
Exactly.
But then he just kind of floats around. And he's still not really being figured in a really major way. Right,
like he gets sent to Ohio Valley Wrestling, and he does some stuff on SmackDown and Raw, but he's just kind of just there. And it's just not interesting.
Until 2006, when he feuds with The Undertaker at Mania, in probably the most forgettable Undertaker-Mania match there is.
I know.
And it's not Mark's fault. It's not Undertaker's fault either. It's just, it didn't work. It just didn't work.
I mean, they tried.
They did try.
He hangs around a bit, and then in 2008, he goes to ECW, or WWECW, with Tony Atlas as his manager, and becomes ECW World Champion.
I actually really liked this Mark Henry. I was watching ECW in 2008, 2009. I really liked Mark Henry. And I thought Tony Atlas was great with Mark Henry. That was a great pairing. And what Mark was able to do, and this was kind of really the precursor to the Hall of Pain that he would start doing in 2011. This is really where that gimmick originated.
Right. Like, this was the first time that you could tell that Mark Henry was tired of being pushed around and tired of being pushed, given the short leash. He wanted to be champion, and he became champion. It's just a shame that it's, again, WWECW.
Yeah, it is, but it was... in all things considered, it was a good precursor for what was to come, considering where his career would lead, and it was a good way to say that good things were headed his way.
Right. And then they decided they turned him face, which was a bad decision. They had him, ironically, they had him in a tag team with MVP against Chris Jericho and Big Show back when they were the tag team champions.
Yep, I remember watching that too. Jericho. Oh, man. What a weird time for tag teams.
I actually think MVP and Mark Henry was a really good tag team, by the way.
They were good. They just didn't get enough of a run. I don't think. They didn't get enough of to really gel as a team and really form more of an identity together. And besides, with the tag division being Jericho and Big Show and then DX and then Show Mizness.
Miz Show or Show Miz, whatever the fuck the tag team was.
Yeah, what a time.
Which was a blatant ripoff, but then WWE blatantly ripped off their own stuff. So
and the only reason that Jericho and Big Show were tag champions to begin with is that they threw together the team of Jericho and Edge, and then Edge got injured. Tag team wrestling, ladies and gentlemen.
After they won it from Primo and Carlito.
Yeah, well, at least
WWE Tag Team Division 2009, 10, and 11 was weird times.
Very weird times. Very weird times.
But yeah, Henry on Raw was just floating around again after ECW, which was, again, a really big disappointment. But then, in 2011, he goes to SmackDown, and he turns heel on John Cena and Christian. He puts Sheamus in the Hall of Pain, and then he puts Big Show in the Hall of Pain, and then he puts Randy Orton in the Hall of Pain, and he gets the World Championship, as you just saw in our match of the week.
Indeed.
And all of this, by the way, Mark Henry, he is got a new attitude. When he talks, he has such anger and intensity and ferocity. It is arguably Mark Henry's best run. And his world title run, while it wasn't very long, it had bangers. Matches against Randy Orton. That steel cage match against Daniel Bryan.
Yeah. Quite good. Even his matches with Big Show were good.
Yep. Which, by the way, that match against Daniel Bryan was almost our match of the week, and it may be a match of the week in the future. You never know.
If we can get it, we'll make it happen. So but Mark Henry's career, and then, as you mentioned, then the retirement speech against John Cena. And that was terrific.
That may be Mark Henry's best promo.
Yeah.
And it was a promo at a time when Mark Henry
needed it.
Getting towards the end of his career, and you could feel that it was going to be the last of it. But he cuts one promo, and he is on fire. And he gets a title match against John Cena. And I'm slightly disappointed that John Cena won that. Although all things considered, I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
But man, what a promo by Henry.
Yeah, I mean, it was still... Mark Henry was still so good at promos at that time that he still wanted to draw you in to watch the matchup and watch the show. And it's a credit to him for how hard he worked to get really good at professional wrestling. Because he really did bust his ass over such a long period of time to get to where he is today. And so revered as a Hall of Famer now. And a man who is really regarded, I think, deservedly so, as one of the really top big men in pro wrestling, at least in WWE's case.
And one of the underrated big men. We don't talk about Mark Henry much when we talk about the big boys, but he definitely deserves recognition for his work. And he's one of those guys who's not that mobile of a big man. He's a throwback to the era of big heel because he doesn't move very fast, but everything he does in the ring looks like it hurts.
Yeah.
Matters. It all is simple, basic storytelling, but it's a throwback to 70s and 80s heel wrestling.
For sure.
A treat.
For sure. And really the thing is with Mark Henry too, as far as for a man his size and for a man of his talent and for what he was before he joined WWE, he's a homegrown, which there aren't many of in WWE. that he's a homegrown talent, WWE born, bred, and retired through. Didn't work anywhere else for anybody else, except unless he's doing something independent now. So we will see about that. And, with the OVW, obviously, but that's still under WWE's umbrella. But went in one place, stayed in one place, and left an impression that I think I'm very happy to have had Mark Henry in the mix. Even if he wasn't the top guy all the time, it was always good to have Mark Henry in the mix.
And apparently, right now, he serves as a backstage role with WWE, and specifically with NXT, helping to mentor future wrestlers, especially with his locker room behavior, which has always been noted as being one of the best guys. Mark Henry, for all the vitriol that he spits at the fans when he's cutting a promo, is one of the nicest guys in the business.
Yeah, you could tell. You could honestly tell. He's perfect for that role, because I think that for what he does, and I've heard a bit of his podcast too, he's, by all accounts, Mark's a great guy. And I'm glad he's been able to have the career he's had.
And if anyone asks, he has a lot left in the tank.
That's right. He ain't done. Not by a long shot.
But unfortunately, that is going to be the end of today's Court-Martail podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening to my episode, but I will be passing the baton back to the Colonial Champion for next week's episode.
Yes. And it was great to have you here, Sky.
It was, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Of course. Of course, this was your show, as I mentioned several times today, but of course, you are a co-host as I am now your co-host, and it's always beneficial to have each member of the show take the wheel every so often. So, Sky, I thank you for taking the burden off my shoulders to bring this show together, and for bringing us a quality show about a quality wrestler and having some very quality conversation we've thrown into here. Stay tuned next week, because we're going to have another show just like this one.
Exactly, my friend. We're going to have a new match of the week. We're going to have a new topic of the week, more news of the week, and our Superstar Spotlight. And we will all see you next time, but only if you like, share, and subscribe. World's Strongest Slam that subscribe button. Hit that bell like Mark Henry hits Randy Orton in the face, and we will be giving more people the opportunity to listen to this wonderful podcast.
Absolutely.
But until then, we must go to our commercial break. See you all next time.